Hooked on Art, and 5 years ago now, I guess, George was with us for the very first Hooked on Art over in the library, and he was part of a panel that included Leela and Rudy Audio, and I think
it was Janet Hook.
Jan, his daughter, Jan Julene, was there.
And Richard Bush.
Richard Bush.
He was
Good
on
memory.
there. No, I wrote it down.
Well, I'm not even going to...
My security blanket here.
I'm not even going to attempt to introduce George and explain his background. He will do that for himself. So please welcome George Gogas.
Well, it really doesn't seem that long ago that we did this, and I'm truly impressed at what has happened since. I mean, the Friends of Two Rivers have done just a marvelous job of expanding this event that I feel is so important, at least from my point of view. It continues the legacy of Walter Hook, and that's the important part of it. And Walter was such a great guy for the community, and that first one was kind of fun. Everybody talked about experiences that they'd had with Walter, and I'll try to bring some of those things back, because here's what I'd like to do today. We've got an hour. See, there's some chairs, a couple of chairs. Yeah, here's one and one. I'd like to spend the first part of this presentation to remembering Walter and bringing up a few of the things that I feel were part of me from Walter, his influences and the way he affected my thinking, my way of working, and then for the last part of the presentation, I'll try to maybe explain some of this monkey business that's up here behind me, and and I'll even bring out the fact that Steve Gluckert and Bev are sitting right in the back. Steve is the main curator at Missoula Art Museum, and I told him don't bother to bring that thing that he wanted to hang up in the library, but he did, and I'll explain that a little bit when I get to the monkey business again. Thanks for bringing that, Steve. It's nice. The thing that's so impressive about the organization that's presenting this is that they're so well organized. I'm just totally impressed by their website, the inclusion of all the art venues out in the other room, and going out and getting some sponsors. I think I've got a list of the sponsors here. I guess we should give a little boost to the sponsors: the Charles Engenhart Foundation, the Cinnabar Foundation, Lean Healthcare West, and River City Grill. So thanks to all the sponsors. River City Grill. I'm just going to digress for a minute. Most of you have probably gone to the River City Grill. You've eaten there, but I just want to bring this to your attention. There's a room to the north as you walk in, and there's another little room to the north where the more windows. If you go into that room and you look in the northwest corner of that room, there's a great photograph of a young Walter Hook. Now, I've never seen that photograph anyplace else, but if you're ever in there, Walter still lives right there. I mean, it's really good to have that in there. And they have a lot of nice photographs of early history for Bonner, Milltown, Finntown, Piltsville, or whatever part you're from. So anyway, I wanted to mention that. Another thing that I was impressed is not only is all the artists that set up their venues, you push for a certain person in different years. Bob Finney was in. Where is he? There he is. Had Bob Finney teaching a class at Bonner in the art program. My gosh, I mean you're getting up there pretty big time stuff here, and I think that's really great. You're sponsoring a person today who does quilts, a male quilter, Carl Rohr. Amazing. This is really great. Usually the domain of ladies making quilts. A male quilter, you've broken into the big time of your cross gender art. I think that's really great. So anyway, I made a bunch of old cards, and I kept reshuffling them. And I really don't know which card to start out with, but I'm going to go through them, and then I'm going to bore you with a couple of written statements too. Walter was important to me. I first met him when he was teaching art ed at the University of Montana. I first came back to Missoula in 1957 at Missoula County High School. And Walter had preceded me, I can't remember exactly how many years, at least 2, maybe 3, because he was at the university by 1955. I didn't come to Missoula till 1957. But Walter must have taught at Missoula County High School for 1 year, at least either the year 54, 55 or 53, 54. At any rate, I knew he'd been there, and I wanted to meet him, so I did. And he was teaching art education at the U of M, plus painting, plus design, whatever. There was only a three-person art program at that point. There was Aidan Arnold, Jim Dew, and Walter Hook. So Walter and I became pretty good friends. Incidentally, the minute they got him up there on the faculty, they made him chair. So, and Rudy Audio brings that out, that when he joined the faculty in 57, that Walter was chair, and Walter was intent on building the program, and he did a real good job. So anyway. Walter and I became pretty good friends, but once we got to developing the program at Hellgate, and Hellgate split off from, Missoula County High School went for any number of years in 2 buildings. We were just talking about that, former students here, shows my age. But Hellgate started in 1964, and as did Sentinel, and they were still considered Missoula County High School. But at Missoula County High School in 1968, we had a pretty dynamic art club. The kids were interested, and they had a good leader, and they wanted to create a gallery space, and they did. We found a new room that was windowless. Talked the custodians into putting up a railing so that we could hang work. And we started giving local artists shows. We had a captive audience in there because it was a classroom. And we gave Walter Hook a show. Wow! I mean, he came up with stuff that nobody realized was Walter's work. And I was so mesmerized by that show, I kind of, confronted him. I kind of sidled up to him and said, would you consider trading? And he said, yeah, let's trade. So that's the Walter Hook I have. And these pieces that he had at that time were cut out of plywood, shaped pieces, and he had canvas adhered to the plywood, and he painted these kind of optical illusions. I mean, he never did this again. In fact, there's only one spot in the book that they made of his work that refers to this, and this is a photograph of Walter standing in front of one of them. And that to me was so important because not only for the trade, but because I realized that here was a person that was not tied to a signature style. Everybody can think of Walter's stuff in so many different ways, but a lot of people say, well, you know, he's the guy that did bison and Easter eggs and flying kites and fat cats and flat cats and, you know, stuff like that. Or maybe they've seen the later stuff, the flowers, and I can open some of this stuff up a little bit for you. But here was a man that felt that the freedom of doing whatever turned him on at that point was of vital importance. And I picked up on that. And I thought, now, I'm not against signature styles. In fact, I kind of envy people who have good signature styles because they've got it, you know, within themselves. They don't have to struggle to come up with something new every time they do some work. Also, signature styles, you know, become an identity factor, and I think that's good. I have nothing against it, but sometimes if you get trapped in a signature style, you're inhibited. So personally, I feel that maybe that, you know, that puts you in a box that you can't get out. And the one bad thing that can happen if you have a signature style and say that you're really peddling some stuff through a gallery, a dealer, and he's making money and you're making a few bucks out of the deal, and then you say, oh, I want to try something else, and he says, oh, hey, wait a minute. We don't want to, you know, kill the goose that laid the golden egg here. And so you're trapped. And I think some people may feel that, or maybe they don't. Maybe they feel, gee whiz, I've struggled long enough to get to where I'm at, and I'm going to just continue and feel real happy about that. But I want to bring that out about Walter because I think that is such an important aspect of his work. And maybe we can, you know, touch on that again. Another thing that Walter did for me before I move on, those of you that have taught know that salary schedules are based on teachers all over the place. They're based on education and time spent, you know, on the job, and the salary schedule, you know, escalates. So many credits and so many years of experience. Well, I was to the point where, gee, I had to move up on the salary schedule because we'd been concentrating for a number of years on training and showing horses, and I hadn't been paying too much attention to that, you know, just accepting what was there. And I realized, geez, I'm getting a little older. I better get up on top of the salary schedule as far as I can get, you know, before things all come crashing down. So I cornered Walter one day and I said, do you think you could sign me up for some postgraduate credits? And he says, yeah, sure, we'll figure something out. So we had a meeting, and he says, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I got something in mind. I've got a series in mind. And he says, all right, let's you start your series this quarter. I wanted to do a couple of quarters work, you know, do it in winter so it wouldn't cut into my summer activities. and he said, well, we'll do it in the winter quarter. That's when we still had quarters, or they still had quarters at the U of M. And so he says, I'll see you at mid-quarter and see where you're at, and I'll see you at the end of the quarter and see where you're at. Well, that was fine with me. And by gosh, after 2 years of this, Walter, who at that time was living up Patty Canyon. I don't know if anybody recalls that, but he had his home was up Patty Canyon, not way up the canyon, but kind of at the mouth of the canyon. And he had a gallery. He developed a gallery, which was it was a nice space. Got him in kind of trouble with the neighbors. They thought this was a commercial thing, and this was a residential area. But anyway, he had this real nice gallery. He gave me a show. Gosh, it was the culmination of one series that I did called the Montana Midnight Series, and I thought it was really a great show because where I was painting, these paintings were getting darker and darker and darker. Montana Midnight, they're totally abstract. And I took him up to Walter's place, and he put him up. And my mother was still living at that time. I didn't want to, burden her with being at an opening, which is kind of confusing. So I took her before the opening. We went together, and Walter turned on he was really good at lighting stuff. We walked into that gallery space, and I looked at those paintings, and I saw them entirely different eyes. I couldn't believe they just glowed. I mean, they were so good. I felt so good about them that I thought they were pretty good. But anyway, that was another thing that Walter did, and so he just seemed to be the type of person that was solid and responsible and accessible. And I remember in the book Celebration, I don't know if you people have ever seen this book. If you don't have it, if you're really interested in Walter Hook, I don't know if it's still in print. I think you could buy this out there. I hope that Bonner has one in his library. Several? Good. Lila Audio made a statement. A number of us made statements in this book, but the first sentence of Lila Audio's was this: Walter was always on the job. And that's true. Walter was a responsible person. In everything he did, in his teaching, the way he conducted himself, he was just a responsible guy. And I'll always remember that. Walter never backed off. I don't know how he did it. In my statement, I'll read it. I say that, I was just impressed by his work ethic, but he was always working. I had an art colleague call me up one time and say, "Do you ever have a creative block?" He says, "I've got a creative block right now." I said, "I can't get anything done. I can't even get started. What do you do?" I said, "Well, I usually don't have too many of those." I said, because I kind of go along with Walter Hook's idea. You just switch over to, I bounce around a lot. I try something else. And I said, but when I really have a block, I said, I just go out and swing up on a horse and go to training for a week or two. And that will clear my mind, and I'll come back and confront a painting and get going again. Well, I don't think that meant too much to him because he didn't have a horse to go get on. and at any rate, but Walter was that way. And another thing I want to bring up is that I would say that Walter lived a conventional life. That I couldn't think of any other term. I couldn't think of something that would be more descriptive of that. In horse auction language, Walter was straight as a string, true as a die. He really was a model citizen. In the 60s and the early 70s, there was a whole group of really good artists in Missoula, as well as good writers in the creative writing program at the U of M, and some that were not in the program but were writing poetry. They hung out at Eddie's Club. And I don't know if you know where Eddie's Club is, or was. It's no longer Eddie's Club. It's called Charlie B's now. If you haven't been there, ever been there, you really should go, because Nye's, what was his first? Lee Nye. Lee Nye's legacy is still on the walls of Charlie B's. All those great photographs, tremendous photographs. And they're in there with all the smoke and all. I guess it's smoke-free now. I think maybe Charlie B's is smoke-free. Is Charlie B smoke-free? I was there for lunch about a month ago, I guess, and I didn't pay any attention. But at any rate, there was a real group that hung out there. And I'm not going to mention any names. There might be somebody in the room, but good artists and good writers. Walter didn't belong. He didn't do that. I mean, he didn't go there and drink, till midnight and then work till 3 in the morning on art. Walter didn't do dope. Walter, he just wasn't that type of guy. Walter, everybody knows, he fished. Walter knew these hills all around us. He knew the pockets where the elk and the deer might be. He could tell you that. I mean, he just was a regular, all-around American human being, I guess. I can't think of other terms to use. So, but he made great art, and maybe he wasn't the stereotypical artist. I mean, he wasn't bohemian, and he didn't live in a ratty garret or any of that stuff. So I just think that's a plus too. And I talked about his eclecticism, that in both media and subject, he pursued whatever turned his crank at that time. And that impressed me. Well, another thing that impressed me about Walter's work, you get to looking at it. Walter paid attention in design class. Walter's compositions are just rock solid. They're like battleships. You can't push them around in any way to make them any better. I think he was concerned about that, and it comes out in just about everything. So maybe if you could say, maybe he didn't have a signature style, you could always tell the hand. I like that term. And his compositions were always good. They're always structured. One other thing I want to mention, in his search for new things, Walter at one point wanted to do metal sculpture. He didn't know how to weld. You know what he did? He went to the high school and got the high school welding teacher to teach him how to weld. Now that's pretty good. I mean, he took a welding class with the high school teacher. Now, I thought that was pretty. It just showed you what kind of a guy he was. I'll mention the book because it was put together through Lee Morrison's auspices, I would say. I can't call her Lee Morrison. She was in my class in high school. Her name was Vina Lee Thompson. And she didn't like Vina Lee later on. She married Dick Morrison, and so she became Lee Morrison. And she painted watercolors. She got mesmerized by Walter Hook's work. She was kind of his dealer, and eventually she was the secondary market for Walter Hook stuff. And she was a good appraiser. She could look at his stuff, or I guess she could look at anybody's stuff and come up with a price. But Vina Lee was instrumental in putting together this book. And if you haven't seen it, now a lot of you all know it and own it, and that's good. It's broken up into different categories of what Walter did, from some landscapes and real early stuff to the eggs, and then it ends up with the eggs and bison and fruit, and it ends up with the flowers, which are really beautiful. I accused Walter at that time. I said, "Geez, Walter, that kind of smacks of Georgia O'Keeffe." Well, it didn't make any difference to him. I mean, those were Walter's flowers. I mean, he didn't care. Well, we all feed off of each other anyway. I mean, I'm feeding off of two guys right here, and I'm going to try to explain that here in a minute. We all feed off of each other. So, but anyway, I always got a kick out of, they've got in here one section called whimsy, and things that are incongruous. And I liked them. Here, there's this one with a seagull in front of a table, just the upper part of the seagull. And then on the table are plums, and then behind the plums that are on the table is a painting of plums. I mean, he did this all the time, and he did it tongue-in-cheek. And then he'd say, well, there's 15 plums. Title it 15 plums. And you count those plums, there were never 15 plums. I mean, invariably, there was, maybe parts, but even with the parts, there weren't 15 plums. So, at any rate, if you have a second afterward to look through this book, I think you'll find it really very, very interesting. Let's see, I've got, yeah, okay. I'm going to leave you with two stories about Walter, as far as this section goes. And then we'll move on to maybe trying to explain all this stuff behind me. When I was at Big Sky, and I can't remember the exact year, but it had to be probably the school year of 1983-84. Lo and behold, for no reason in the world, I can't figure out how this possibly could have happened. We ended up with 3 exchange students from Finland. I mean, 3. And I just got to thinking one day, my gosh, 3 Finnish exchange students and 2 Finnish artists on the faculty at the University of Montana. One retired just recently, the other one's still there. There ought to be a meeting here. This might be an interesting setup. So I talked the administration into this. I called in the kids, and they said, yeah, they'd like to meet, people that had Finnish ancestry. I used to kid Rudy Audio and Walter Hook. I'd say, 2 Finns is too many on the faculty. But anyway, Rudy was a Finnish ancestry from Butte, and Walter was from Finntown. You all know where Finntown is, across the river. God, Finntown Hall used to have great dances there at one time. Anyway, so I got these kids together, and we didn't do it on class time. We didn't do it through the auspices of, whatever they called it in those days, where you took kids out to see something going on in the community. And I just took them in my own car. I took a chance. And so we went, the first place we went was to Rudy's, and Rudy and Leela's. And Rudy at this point, this is early 80s, and he was absolutely buried into working with the program that Apple Computers had called McPaint. I don't know if you remember McPaint. And he was really learning and working with this thing. And Rudy could do this. He was brilliant. He was like, Walter had a math degree. Rudy could do calculus. I mean, these guys were really bright guys. At any rate, Rudy immediately took these kids right into the computer room and explained to them all that he was doing with the computer. It was fascinating to them. Leela made tea. I mean, what a gracious, host. And we spent quite a few minutes there. And everybody enjoyed it. And Rudy and Leela showed them all the art that they have. Their house is full of art from all over, all kinds of stuff. Not just ceramics, all kinds of, everything. And then we went to Walter's. And Walter had left the Patty Canyon home, and he'd gone up to Farviews. And in those days, we used the term dichotomy. Have you ever heard that? A dichotomy. This was a dichotomy. Walter's space was, just the opposite of Rudy and Leela's space. Both good. I mean, both great artists doing good stuff. Walter's, everything had its place, and there was a place for everything. And tidy studio. Marge was very nice hostess. I can't remember what we had up there, but it was something very good. Walter was gracious, inviting. He even threw a few Finnish words around, and boy, did those kids pick up on that. They loved that. People of other nations really get excited when you use their words. I can throw a few Greek words around and endears you, and doesn't endear me in Turkey, though. Anyway, but the one thing that, besides talking to them in Finnish, Walter did this, and that really impressed me. He pulled out, and he had them all ready to go. He had a rolled up reproduction, rubber banded, of one of his, I think it was a bison kite thing at that time, Easter eggs, and he gave each one of them a reproduction. I said, boy, if you guys throw that away, you're stupid. I said, you keep those. They're really good pieces of art. So anyway, that's the story of that. Well, the last thing I want to, how many of you were here the first Hooked on Art? Anybody here Hooked on Art the first time? Okay, Leela Audio told a story about Walter. Anecdote. And I wish Leela was here because she could tell it so much better than I can. I can't tell it very well, but I'm going to try. Marge, Walter's wife, wanted to get in touch with Walter while he was at school. Walter was in the process of teaching a life drawing class at the time. And Marge got through to his office, and the phone was answered, and this woman was on the phone. And I don't know if you know how life drawing classes are conducted. Most places it's about the same. The model, he or she, strikes a pose at the instruction of the instructor and holds it for 15, 20 minutes. Bob, is that about right? Yeah. Yeah. And then the model takes a break, and the instructor will go around and check people's work and talk to the students. Well, the model, male or female, never stays in the class, at least not in my experience. Always leaves, goes to another place. Okay. This was the model on the other end of the phone when Marge called up, and she says she wanted to get a hold of Walter. The model says, "Well, if you could just wait a minute until I get my clothes on, I'll go find him for you." I love that story. But Leela could tell it so much better. Okay, I'm kind of running out of time here, but I'm going to read a couple of things here. I don't really want to read a lot. People think of Walter as a whimsical artist expressing, humorous things, and he really was, I think, a pretty serious artist. In fact, as I've said in my statement. But here's one of Walter's statements, and I'll read it. It's in the book, and I just pulled it out as one little paragraph out of a number of them. It says, "Education doesn't end until life ends, because you never know when you're going to understand something you hadn't understood before. Understanding does not always mean resolution. Indeed, in our intellectual lives, our creative lives, it is perhaps those problems that will never resolve that rightly claim the lion's share of our energies." Well, Walter was thinking all the time. In my statement, I said in here, and God, they gutted my statement in this book, but maybe rightly so, because I tend to be a little wordy. But I said Walter was one of the most serious artists in Montana, yet he didn't take himself seriously, an admirable trait. He maintained his creative freedom by being as eclectic as he wanted and never restricted himself to a specific style. I truly appreciated this and have followed his example. But of all, I think his strongest influence on me was his dedication to his work, which I must admit is quite difficult to emulate. Walter Hook was a very special artist. Now, I'm going to leave you with this other statement because it ties in, and then I'll try to explain some of this stuff behind me in the last few minutes. If art is to nurture the roots of our culture, society must set the artist free to follow his vision wherever it takes him. John F. Kennedy, 1963. Okay, so Walter fits right in. I don't care what your politics are. What Kennedy said is right. Now, let's see, they slipped me a bunch of these. The museum brought these pro bono. That's pretty nice. If you would like to have one, there's a few here. I'll let you pass them down back. The only reason that maybe you should look at those, the image on the cover and the image that two friends of, or the Friends of Two Rivers used in their promotion of this thing is the painting called When Charlie Met Pablo on the Open Range. And that was the beginning of this series that I've continued with other series going on in the meantime, but I've continued with this for, my gosh, it's been 23, 24 years now, because that painting was done in 1987. An attempt to get into a show that the Missoula Art Museum had called Western Spaces. Was it Western Spaces? Something like that. Western Spaces, Western Places. I can't quite recall the name. But I thought, my gosh, I've wanted to be like Charlie Russell way back. When I was in high school, that's what I aspired to do, was to paint like Charlie Russell. I wanted to be a cowboy like Charlie Russell too. I found out I couldn't do that. So, but at any rate, I wanted to paint like Charlie Russell, and I thought, well, maybe I can make an autobiographical piece that would combine Charlie Russell with my introduction to modernism, which took place both at the U of M and the University of Washington, and turned me 180 degrees around, sent me off in a different direction. And maybe I can combine those two ideas and come up with something that would be maybe meaningful to expressing the West, because I really felt the West is worthy of being expressed. So I painted this painting, and I used kind of a pseudo-cubistic style. The art teacher here is really great because she's got art history around, and she shows stuff. They even took a whole bunch of art history things off the board just so that this could be picked up on camera. But anyway, so I combined a pseudo-cubistic Picasso style with Charlie Russell's subject matter. And that first painting came from a painting that Russell made called Jerk Down. And Russell just loved those wrecks that happened out in cowboy country. All those action scenes were his signature style. I mean, over and over again, he used a lot of them. So anyway, that started that was kind of the genesis, a germination of a concept. And I could remember, even though I jumped from place to place, I still remember what they taught us at the University of Washington: do a series, stick with a series, exhaust the idea till it dies, and then move on to something else. And so I started the series. It hasn't died yet. Because it allows me to make political and just statements about everyday life and current events, and I can say it through my titles. And as Steve Gluckert well knows, the titles become more important than the paintings, really, because if you leave the titles off, paintings don't mean anything. I mean, you look at them, what the heck, you know? But the titles are really tied in. This reproduction off to the left, or your left, my right, is based on a painting that Russell called In Without Knocking. Now, and a lot of you know In Without Knocking. These guys, cowboys came into town, got all boozed up, and they decided to go into the bar, and they just rode their horses right into the bar. Smashed through the plank sidewalk and shooting the revolvers in the air and having a good time. Well, I decided to, at that point I wasn't, really into making too many social statements or political statements through this. It was a pretty benign title. It says, and I entitled this whole series as Judith Basin Encounter, which I better explain that. Those of you who are familiar with Montana know where the Judith Basin is. That's that drainage from, on the west it would be the high woods and the Little Belts, thank you very much, the Little Belts. The east would be the Judith Mountains, and then to the south it would be that divide between the Muscle Shell and up where Judith Gap is the top. Everything that drains down into the Judith River is called the Judith Basin. Well, anyway, that's where Charlie landed. The first time he came to Montana, Charlie worked on a sheep outfit right in the middle of the basin. Utica was a big time town at that time. Well, anyway, so I just said Judith Basin Encounter, when Charlie and Pablo had a drink together. All right, now the next one here, to get through with this in a flash, the original of this painting, or of this reproduction, the original is owned by the Charlie Russell Museum over in Great Falls. And it's, I would say 5 by 7. I think it's maybe five and a half by 7, because it's 66 inches by 84 inches. They keep it, in storage most of the time. So. but I imagine if you went over and said, I want to see that, they might take you down to wherever they hide that stuff and show it to you. The next image here is one that's owned by the University of Montana, And I was telling somebody this morning that it's safe because two of them approximately the same size. Let's see, what's the size of that? It's about 4 by, I've got it written down here someplace. Well, anyway, it's, yeah, it dropped out. It's about this big by this big. And they're on either side of the lobby as you walk into the University Theater. Okay. Nobody sees them because you're always heading for your seats or you're going to the ticket booth. And these paintings are way up high. Well, that's kind of good because they can't be vandalized up there very easily. So anyway, that's where it is. But this is based on the little painting, little watercolor that's in the Historical Society collection in Helena. Charlie called it Bronc to Breakfast. And, you know, everybody is aware, pretty much aware of Bronc to Breakfast. And the cook is really angry because this guy allowed his horse, which he can't control at this point, I mean, he's really bucking, is going right through the campfire and knocking over guys and spilling their coffee. But these guys on all around, you know, they're all grinning. They all think that's funny. But at any rate, I called it when Charlie and Pablo had breakfast at McDonald's. And so then a lot of little symbolism started creeping in. I could make some social comments. Yes, the bows of the chuck wagon become the golden arches. Okay. And hiding in the chuck wagon, I have a good friend that maintains a chuck wagon kind of as an antique thing. He does it. He pulls it on these wagon rides. But it's pretty good. And there's a Big Mac hiding in there. And God, they're spilling the Dutch oven. The Dutch oven and is getting tipped over into the fire. Maybe those are egg McMuffins. I don't know. But at any rate, there's a lot of that stuff and in this painting. Personally, this was one of the more successful paintings of the whole series. For me, it just worked. I mean, the organization worked, the color worked, the way the pigment went on the surface was satisfying to me. Some of the others weren't as satisfying. So at any rate, I brought those, but to show you how these things transpire, this is the painting that this gentleman right here owns from the Missoula Art Museum auction just this last Saturday night, a week ago. And this is a reproduction. It's not a photolithographic reproduction like these two are from Advanced Litho in Great Falls. This is a Giglet print by gosh, I have trouble with my memory. Johnson, quick, does Pernice prints. Yeah, you think of it at 3 o'clock in the morning. Don't bother to call me at 3 in the morning. Anyway, it's a Giglet. It's an inkjet reproduction. Now, I kind of knew what I wanted to do for the auction, and I'd seen the image, and it was on the book cover of a book on ranching in the early 20th century, late 19th and early 20th century in Montana. And here was this image, and it was at the book exchange. So I went down to the book exchange and I saw it. I just didn't have the cash in my pocket to buy it, so I thought, I'm going to come back in a couple of days and I'm going to buy that, and I'll have the image. I came back and it was gone. Oh my, what am I going to do? I really want that image. I got angry, see. And I said, Lynn, I said, get me one of those reproductions. We've got to have one of those. She says, well, you find the reproduction spot and I'll make sure that you get it. So I started looking, and I knew that it was in the Glenbow Museum at Calgary. So I found the image. And so I said, Lynn, it's at the Glenbow. And I says, get me a reproduction. And she did. And so that's what I'm using. And I don't know if you see the maybe it doesn't make sense. That's why I brought this, because see, I take here's Charlie Russell's image. I mean, this guy's obviously, it's called one of the rough string, you know, and this guy's been giving this horse at bucks every day, and they're on roundup, you can tell, because they're the wagons. And here are all these other riders, and they're all, you know, sitting on their horses grinning, ha ha, you know, this guy's having a tough time this morning. And he's riding this getting the kinks out of this bucking horse. Well, this is a typical Russell. It's a good period in Russell. I mean, he'd come to maturity in his color and just about everything else. The use of his paint, everything. He gets this big, wide open sky, this huge vista. I mean, he knew how to do that. It was part of his expression. Everything that Russell liked was in this, and everything that people liked that wanted to buy Russells is in this. Now, when I started moving toward Picasso, and there he is up there under shape, I had to flatten things out. You know, if I tried to go back into space, I would be violating the modernist idea of maintaining the integrity of the surface. You know, you had to maintain the integrity of the surface. So anyway, I had to flatten everything out, and in order for me to comply with Picasso, flat shapes, but I hope good organization, like Walter Hook, this is what came out. And so here's the underlying image, and I'll leave this up here afterwards. And there's my image. And the title in this is quite current. This is Judith Basin Encounter, when Charlie and Pablo struggled to survive the financial meltdown. So, I mean, I can say things. Now, sometimes I say things that people don't like, but that's what John F. Kennedy told me I could do. And so I'll leave it at that, but we still have a few minutes if you have questions. I don't know if I can answer them, but I can try. I'm really impressed that Bonner is continuing to have art education. That's important. I sure hope the legislature doesn't start cutting down on stuff like that. Anyway, okay.
I noticed that the difference in color is more muted in one than the other.
Yes.
Two here. And I wonder how much Russell's use of color and mix influenced you, and what the difference you were doing with color in those two. Okay,
a good question. Russell's color, I'm really impressed with it as he developed. His early color is really pretty pukey. His drawing is really pretty pukey too, early on. But as he matured, I really got excited about his color and his use of color. But it didn't influence me at all in this. What influenced me was Picasso's use of color. You see, this is when, you know, Charlie meets Pablo, and there has to be a combination. The combination is Charlie's paintings as a reference, and his, you know, action, all the stuff that he liked, all the wrecks that were happening, plus changing it over to a pseudo-cubistic style, which was mine.
What about the difference in the color there?
Oh, okay. This is earlier. I was still searching. These two are part of the first 6 paintings that Missoula Art Museum graciously put together as a show that went all over the state of Montana. Chester, Shoto, Chinook, Sydney, I mean, places that really needed some art. Now, I'm sorry, Chester, Bev, I know you're from Chester, but...
Those of us from the other side of the mountains would speak that way about this side.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. I'm convinced. Boy, those guys are.
I just had one comment to bring out, and that is, and you make this comment in the interview in the book, but it's important to note that Charlie Russell and Pablo Picasso were contemporaries.
They were. They were. And, you know, they lived at the same time, and I'm absolutely convinced that Charlie knew what was going on in Europe because, you know, he went to England. And what was that little book that this guy wrote about? I can't remember it anyway. But Charlie was showing in a place where there were some current things being shown quite close by. And I'm sure that he walked in, took a peek at that stuff. I don't think he really liked it. I don't even know what he would do. Ginger Render thinks that Charlie would laugh if he saw my stuff and get a chuckle over it. But he didn't. He thought those guys were, you know, they weren't doing the right thing. So, but on the other hand, I don't think Pablo was even aware of Charlie Russell. I think that was something outside of his world.
But undeniably, when Russell went to Europe, he became a better painter.
Oh, yeah, I think so.
You can't deny that.
Oh, I think Russell was far more sophisticated than people give him credit for. I think he knew what was going on all the time. I think he picked up from the Impressionists. I think he picked up from all kinds of current illustration that was going on. I think he knew how to understand and then manipulate whatever he saw into his own art. He was pretty clever guy. I mean, I think he was as serious, obviously, as Walter Hook was, and capable of understanding a whole lot. But I think Picasso would have been, you know, he'd been way out. He's someplace else in a different world. Okay, any other questions? I don't want to keep you guys from lunch or, yes?
When we first moved to Missoula, we bought one of your paintings at an auction. I knew nothing about you. I still don't know.
Okay, one that a reproduction?
No, it's a painting.
Oh, a painting. Oh, wow.
And it's called, it's not as big as the ones you were talking about. It's called Too Lazy to Work.
Oh, yeah, okay, that's a whole different series. That's on the Bull Riders.
Well, does that have a reference to any other artist? That's what I might...
No, I'll tell you where that came from. Lynn and I got so engrossed in bull riding because the professional bull riders were getting organized at that time, PBR, and man, I mean, that took off like a house afire. I mean, those guys that put their money into that organization, they based it on NASCAR. They really did, and they've made a bunch of money. And now there's two of those things going on because the PRCA, Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association, is also sponsoring a whole bunch of bull ridings on their own. They call it, what, Extreme Bulls, something like that. But anyway, it's strictly bull riding. There no barebacks or no saddle broncs, no calf roping, none of that stuff, no barrel racing, only bull riding. And we got so excited about that. We went to the PBR finals 2 years in a row down in Las Vegas. And I did this series, and there's 60 of them in this series, and I don't own one. I've got to paint one for myself, but I quit painting the bull riders because, I don't know, everybody started painting bull riders. But you know where the title comes from? The Too Lazy to Work? Do you want the whole title? Are you guys capable of getting the whole title? Okay. The newspaper reporter or the media reporter comes up to bull rider and says, "How come you ride bulls?" And the bull rider says, "Well," he says, "I'm too lazy to work, and I'm too nervous to steal, and I'm too jealous to pimp, so I ride bulls." Yeah.
We had the first couple.
Okay. Anyway, any more questions?
Jealous.
Well, you've been a great audience. Yeah. Support the Friends of Two Rivers. They do good.